Collective, and Just Stop Oil is an organization causing a lot of commotion lately. They vandalized or attempted to vandalize a Van Gogh, various other priceless, timeless paintings or artworks, and of course, stopping traffic, which seems to be a favorite of the environmentalists because they get to, I guess, hit two birds with one stone, although that metaphor would probably upset them because birds are a part of nature, but human beings apparently are not. They get to both stop traffic, which, you know, I guess reduces pollution, as well as getting their point across in a way that people simply cannot ignore. Now, if you agree with them, if you believe in their worldview, then I suppose nothing is too outrageous to get your point across. You know, if the world is really in jeopardy, if everyone's going to die and everything is going to die, or something is catastrophic is going to happen, then you're really just doing great work, I guess, in that worldview. So let's look at what they actually believe, or what the environmentalists in general tend to believe. I'm going to offer you that it's pretty mainstream. It's pretty mainstream stuff. It's not radical. It's, I mean, I guess it is radically environmentalist, but is environmentalism thinking outside the box, or is it how we were all raised and educated to be? Anyone remember the show Captain Planet? At this point, I'm dating myself by asking about that show, but you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, that show was it. The five teenagers, the Planeteers, as they were called, each one of them had a superpower: earth, fire, wind, water, heart. You know, a special power that they can manipulate the elements in some way. And with their powers combined, Captain Planet comes about. He's like a cool superhero that really shows the bad guys who's boss. And what are the bad guys doing? They're polluting. They're corporations, usually, I think, if I recall, businessmen, people defiling and exploiting this innocent, pristine earth of ours that we all must share in order to get profit. By the way, little side tangent. As a kid, I thought the lamest superpower was heart, right? To be able to bring fire, earth, you know, wind, water. These things are powerful. But heart? Who the heck wants that superpower? Obviously, looking back, that was definitely the greatest power of all. To be able to manipulate somebody's heart, so to speak, to manipulate how somebody feels. You have that power. You get that power ring or whatever he had. You are definitely in control of other people. But in any case, I don't want any of those powers. Ultimately, what I want is people to be rational and to trade with each other voluntarily to mutual benefit. And that is what human nature calls for. And unfortunately, the sort of mainstream philosophical tendency through history and to this day has often been to see human activity as somehow outside of nature, right? Like anything human beings do qua human beings in order to live as human beings safely, with longevity, and with personal flourishing. Those things, that is like somehow outside of nature. And it really traces back to, I think, Christianity or some other mythological influence, the Garden of Eden. And there are equivalents of the Garden of Eden in various historical or prehistorical sort of traditions. This view that once upon a time, we were all innocent, naked, and living without care. But then eating that fruit, you know, eating that fruit of knowledge or of reason, of whatever, something that is not just passively soaking in direction. I'm not even going to say knowledge, because knowledge was the problem, according to these myths. Just sort of, I guess, people, the way these myths tell us, like we didn't have to make any effort to live, right? We were just perfectly content and happy, running around like cherubs flying through space. But then reason came about. And, you know, just recently I was learning more about the philosophical influences in Russia, about Putin, a guy on YouTube named Kraut, like sauerkraut. I think he's from Germany. And he just released a very long, like a 20, 30-minute video, basically making the case that Dugin, the famous Russian philosopher, is actually small potatoes compared to some other philosophers that have influenced Putin and the Russians, such as Ivan Ilyin, I think is the main guy. And what do all of these philosophers have in common that are said to have influenced Putin and the Russians. They all see reason or anything sort of rational as basically a Western advent. Some of them, like Carl Schmitt, says it's a Jewish, influence that hurts the Russians. Basically, their goal is to get rid of reason and all these other Western corrupting, degenerate forces, influences, and just get to the back to the glory of the Russian people, the way that they see it. Everywhere you look, wherever there is authoritarianism, wherever there is the rejection of individual rights and of individual happiness, you see this explicit rejection of reason. You see this collectivization, which really means authoritarian-led dictation of what's true and what everybody must do. And we see this over and over and over again through history. And when you look at the environmentalists, they may be attaching themselves to some legitimate scientific claims. Let's say it is true that human activity is causing having a particular effect on the climate. That could be true. But the premise, the sort of underlying view that anything humans do is inherently detrimental to everything on the planet, all life. And some of them, they go further than life. I mean, some of them, if you don't get them to identify this explicitly, they basically operate on the idea that just the Earth itself, just this ball of dirt floating through space is the sort of standard of value. And anything that happens to change it is inherently corrupting. So gone are the days of, the communists saying, we're going to industrialize and we're going to bring glory to the proletariat. That's too industrial for them. I mean, the new left and the new left and every new generation of leftists and anti-capitalist that comes along, they basically see in industry and reason and science capitalism as like a crime against something that is not human. So this is not like a radical view. I mean, the way some of these organizations act on it is sort of radical, because most people, they agree with this premise, but they understand you can't abide by it perfectly. And as a perfect example of this, I'll bring up the most recent episode of the Bill Maher Real Time with Bill Maher. I watched this, and the funny thing is, Bill Maher, 10 years ago or earlier, he was seen as like a real leftist. He was pushing America in the direction of socialism. He was saying straight up, like, okay, let's stop dragging our feet on this. Let's just go full socialist. And as time passed, as the left has chewed him up and spit him out, he's basically, I think, realized the left have kind of lost their way with this woke stuff. He also hates Trump, and he hates what the right have turned into. So he's kind of come to symbolize this sort of centrist, this sort of saving grace, as some of us see it, like the people they're rejecting wokeness, they're rejecting populist Trumpism, and they're basically, they could be the people who save civilization, as some of us sometimes see it. But then I hear Bill Maher on the most recent episode saying to his guests, he says, like the biggest victims of everything we do are animals. We don't talk about this enough. It's animals. Everything we do as human from the start, meaning since the dawn of human activity, has been hurting the environment. And we're just never going to deal with this. So let me get this straight, Bill Maher. When you're not busy, telling the woke people to relax and to stop ruining everything for everyone, and when you're not telling, Trump to take a hike, you're actually just saying all human activity from the very start has been detrimental to what exactly? Blank out, as I think Rand used to put it. Blank out. Don't actually say explicitly what you're hinting at. And what made it even worse is that a guest on the Bill Maher show was Yuval Harari. I'm guessing it's Harari. Anyway, the guy. He wrote *Sapiens*, and he was there to promote his new children's book called Unstoppable Us, something like that. How humans took over Earth. And I assumed it was very pro-human activity. It might be pro-human activity. But when Bill Maher said this, how everything we've done as humans has hurt the planet from the start, you would think a guy pushing a book called How Humans Took Over the Earth would point out to Bill Maher, well, yeah, as human beings, everything we do must sort of conflict with the default of nature, because that's our method of survival. We don't just live in a particular small region that we're kind of evolutionarily adapted to live our short instinct driven or impulse or stimulus driven life. We think, we plan, we produce, we exploit the elements. You would hope he might say that, but of course, Yuval said, no, you're not, I don't know. The young people today, a lot of them really care about the environment. Oh, okay, great. So young people, like the ones throwing soup at the Van Gogh, they really care about the environment. And then what does Bill Maher say in response? He goes, okay, but what are they going to do? Not drive a car? Kind of like, yeah, we all need to drive cars, right? Which kind of touches upon this, again, a very Christian style inherent guilt that the environmentalists basically see as us having. Like, on one hand, everything we need to do in order to live hurts nature, quote unquote, nature, hurts the environment. On the other hand, it's wrong, but like we need to do it, but it's wrong. Kind of like, again, very original sin. You know, we're born guilty. Our nature is inherently evil. That's the way that Christianity ultimately sees man. You know, modern interpretations aside, that is how pure, undiluted Christianity sees people. That is how religion sees people. The Garden of Eden, again, we were purely in sync with nature. We were running around naked, but then the curse of reason, you know, the sin of eating the apple that I guess enabled us to reason and to attain knowledge. That was our downfall. So the mainstream view, the view that is rarely challenged, is the view that everything we do as humans is wrong because we are tampering with nature. It's wrong, but we need to do it. So the moral and the practical are at odds. Isn't that just a wonderful moral code? I'm going to say no. This is what you see with irrational ethics and irrational sort of views of politics. The people, they want socialism. Also, they know basically we need capitalism. We need people individually to sort of conduct business in order to produce anything. On the other hand, that's wrong because it's sort of antithetic to socialism. Name the irrational system, and I'll show you a contradiction in there between the moral and the practical, between what we need to do and what's the right thing to do. So Ayn Rand, of course, offers a what's the word, reconciliation, what is it when you solve a dichotomy? There's a word similar to reconciliation. Maybe reconcile just is the word. You solve this problem. So the moral is the practical. The moral is the practical. And what is practical? What's in the long-term good for your life as a human being. So you want to live as long as you can, but you want to live as a human being. You want to live and flourish. You want to, gain self-esteem. You want to have spiritual values like art and relationships. And that is the moral way to live. That is, I think, how Peikoff put it. Like, that is like morality is like the instruction manual that should have come with man, but didn't. And that is the role of philosophy. That is what a good philosophy offers. And all too often, philosophy has played the opposite role. All too often, philosophy through history and to this day has played the role of divorcing the moral from the practical, divorcing the selfish from the moral, right? Saying that being selfish is evil. And, you look back at Captain Planet or any other environmentalist propaganda, it's always the corporation, right? The businessman who is the bad guy. He's causing pollution. Now, I mean, pollution is not exactly a good thing. It does seem to come with industrialization. You cannot skip past it. The only way you could skip that uncomfortable step in industrialization would be with the use of technology, with increased capitalism. We might get to a point one day where, you can industrialize a new place and somehow not cause any detrimental levels of pollution at all. I don't know how, but technology and capitalism and liberty can get us there if anything can. So, yeah, it just really blew my mind to hear Bill Maher on his recent episode after, lamenting that Republicans are like these full-time conspiracy nuts, and then Democrats have completely given the high ground to the woke. And now what is it that Bill Maher doesn't like about the woke, as he shouldn't like about the woke, is that, again, they see us as having original sin. If you're white, you're automatically racist. If you're straight, you're automatically homophobic. If you're a man, you're automatically sexist. So again, original sin. And someone like Bill Maher saying, whoa, hold on. We all have the ability to choose if we're going to be racist or not. Don't just tell us we're all racist. That word loses any meaning if we're all just automatically racist. So too, you gotta like wonder why would he want to go along with a view that just says human beings, qua human beings, as human beings, living as human beings, prospering as human beings, pursuing our the good life on an individual basis is immoral, is antithetical to what, quote, nature wants. It's absolute mysticism at root, I think. It's, pardon the pun there, root. It's a worship of, Gaia, the goddess of nature. Is that her name? It's like a worship of this sort of omniscient, omnipotent sort of entity, this platonic form of, quote, nature, right? The earth is somehow like this God we all must worship. Now, if you like pristine, quote unquote, nature, great. I'm gonna guess you would like the predators cleared out. Probably you don't want the bears chasing after you when you go hang out there. I'm gonna guess you don't want poison ivy and much worse plants growing. But if you still, nonetheless, if you enjoy basically greenery without buildings, without smoke, without much electricity or anything like that, well, in a laissez-faire capitalist country, in a laissez-faire capitalist system, people can buy land and they can make it a park, they can make it a camping ground, they can make it a resort of some kind, they can make it a botanical garden, and people can enjoy it. Maybe they'll have to pay for it, maybe it'll be given to them as an act of charity. But for any place to be habitable to human beings, for any place to not be dangerous, reason and science and capitalism are in order. And you see these environmentalists, people like Just Stop Oil, in addition to being very mainstream in their approach to ethics and politics and the way they view industry. I don't remember what point I was going to add to that. They're very mainstream. Oh yeah, they're just like antithetic to beautiful things. They don't like beauty. They attack paintings. They attack art. I remember during the BLM violence that was breaking out when I lived in Los Angeles, the big sign welcoming you to Beverly Hills was like vandalized and somebody spray painted "Eat the Rich." They wrote "Eat the Rich" on this. And people love that on social media, right? The pro BLM people that were on their way to go burn down and smash the beautiful, beautiful stores of Beverly Hills. They love that. Oh yeah, eat the rich. What does eating the rich have to do with Black Lives Mattering? Like, I think some of us maybe can see why the same people who are smashing stores in the name of, BLM would kind of be motivated by such envy and nihilism. But on the face of it, like, what's the connection? Like, if you're so outraged at, Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd, why would you say eat the rich? Is Derek Chauvin rich? Like, what does being rich have to do with anything, right? What does smashing people's property have to do with fighting racism? Of course, it's because they have this packaged and integrated or semi-integrated view that basically says capitalism is behind all of this. And 5-6 years ago, when Black Lives Matter first came about in the mainstream, the same thing happened. What started as protesting against alleged police brutality quickly became blocking off the roads to the mall and saying, we're going to smash capitalism. All right, let's read your super chats. Marilyn, thank you for the $5. Marilyn, again with $2, says towns were 50 before the Industrial Revolution. Filthy, I think. Yeah, Marilyn with $2 more says filthy. Also, life expectancy sucked. And life before the Industrial Revolution compared to prehistory was infinitely more preferable, and it sucked until capitalism was unleashed. But completely remove human ingenuity, human reason, completely remove the role of reason and any hint of the scientific method, any level of political liberty on an individual based level, and life was absolutely unlivable. People were actually living naked in, in the woods, and it was not, I suspect, as pleasant as the myth of Adam and Eve makes it sound. So the only way out of this is for people to care about their own personal values. People need to understand, like, you need to ask people, and they need to ask themselves, what matters to me? Some people, all they can come up with is my family. I love my family. And that to me is kind of sad. I mean, there should be things that matter to you in addition to that. But let's say that's all you can come up with. Do you understand your family cannot live and prosper on any level but for capitalism, but for liberty, but for individual rights, but for reason? Environmentalism is hazardous to your family's health. And of course, many people, they've got other values. They want a career, they love art, they love, they love fashion, whatever it is, music. I mean, before the Industrial Revolution, how often did you get to listen to music as the average person, And the list goes on. I mean, it's the fact that anyone even needs to remind anyone about how much capitalism has raised our standard of living, just kind of lets you know just how hard people are working around the clock to try and make us forget that fact. Capitalism, reason, individual rights, these things, although never perfectly embraced by the culture, still, to the elements they were embraced, have raised our standard of living beyond any debate. Bonnie, the member, says the oil stoppers want to control what they feel is wrong, but they don't want it bad enough to employ reason. So no, they're not radical at all. Yeah, I mean, the real radicals are the radicals for capitalism, radicals for reason, radicals for individual rights, for rational egoism, selfishness as a virtue. These are radical views. I mean, I guess radical, the title of this episode is like saying they're not very radical. I guess technically the Just Stop Oil, they are radical in terms of taking their ideology to its extreme, or somewhere towards its extreme. So maybe another way to say it is like they're not unique. They are not original, right? So Ayn Rand is a very original thinker, as much as she sort of pays tribute to Aristotle before her. People like Aristotle and Rand and other giants of the intellect, they're coming up with original views of things, and Rand's ethics is original. It's unique. The story in Atlas Shrugged, it's a unique view. There's no ancient myth that Atlas Shrugged sort of borrows from. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I think we've covered this topic. No other super chats. Upcoming today at 7 p.m. UK time, which is in like 37 minutes, the Fountainhead Book Club with Shoshana Milgram for ARCUK members. The session will also be live streamed for YouTube members. Link in the chat. So become a member. I just want to add another thought I had. Like, there was a time when people wanted to be considered liberal, like leftists or environmentalists or whatever it was, like they kind of saw themselves as like the logical continuity of like the abolitionists, people who freed the slaves, people who fought for civil rights or equal rights under the law, stuff like that. Like they would see themselves as kind of like the continuation of that. They were like, yeah, we're the liberals. On the flip side, you had sort of conservatives saying, oh, no, we're the real liberals. We're the classical liberals, a lot of them would say. Like, no, conservatism is actually the real liberalism, right? We're like an individualists, some of them said. Believe it or not, I know it's hard to imagine. Some of you young people might have a hard time imagining conservatives even having individualism in their vocabulary. But it was a different time. But I mean, jump forward to today. Nobody wants to be called a liberal, right? The leftists, they see liberalism as, white supremacy. They see it as patriarchy. They properly see liberalism as a capitalist, like as related to capitalism and what brought about capitalism. They're correct about that. If liberalism stands for like the Enlightenment view of man as a reasoning being who needs to be allowed to reason and to follow his own judgment. And of course, the conservatives or the right wingers, whatever we're going to call them, the populist right, the new right, they at one point, yeah, like I said, the earlier generation of conservatives, they were calling themselves, no, we're the classical liberals. Today, They want nothing to do with that because they explicitly reject the Enlightenment. They explicitly reject individualism. They want collectivism in some way. They want nationalism, or some of them want like a very like smaller and smaller community, municipalities. It's collectivism, grand or small, grand or local or very local. And it's worth mentioning that the conservatives of today, and this is not a brand new thing. Conservatives have had this sort of skeleton in their closet for a long time, but it's become so much worse in recent years. The right, the new right, they're like explicitly nostalgic for life on the farm, for life, you know, before the Industrial Revolution. They're explicitly nostalgic. They want to go back to a time before technology, you know, took over our lives. And yeah, again, like if you don't like iPhones, if you want to break from technology, quote unquote, again, I'll say, first of all, I'm going to guess you're still going to be using a lot of technology in whatever new way of life you adopt. But the laissez-faire capitalism permits you to live that way. You can go to a particular plot of land and either someone's letting you stay there or you purchase it for yourself, and then you could live as technology free as your heart desires. And of course, you'll still be using a lot of technology or else you'll die, because human beings, we don't, you know, we were not cut out to live like, you know, snakes slithering through the rocks outside. Ryan Shank, thank you for the $4.99. And Not Another Guitar Channel with $5 Australian says, it used to be cool to say live and let live, and minding your own business was a thing. Not anymore. Yeah, because, you know, the way that the new right sees it, they said, well, you know, libertarianism or live and let live, that's what we basically, we let these leftists go crazy. And look what they're pushing on us now. Basically, we've allowed individualism and liberty, a libertarian approach to get us into this mess. That's the way they see it. I will offer, first of all, the woke left, they're anything but individualists. And we have not been capitalist for a very long time. And most importantly, reason has not been in vogue in a long time, and it was never perfectly understood. So read Ayn Rand and, you know, let's give her a try. Let's give her a shake, I say. So yeah, my point about the conservatives is yeah, they're getting nostalgic for you know, life in nature. They're getting nostalgic for life before the Industrial Revolution, and ultimately they don't seem to disagree very much with the environmentalists, you know, on a very basic level. So Yaron Brook has pointed out or predicted for a long time that the unifying figure in America is probably going to be like a Christian environmentalist. And that's a very scary thought. Someone like Tucker Carlson, he hates industrialization. He hates basically civilization, the way he explicitly decries skyscrapers and city life, explicitly so. And of course, him and his party are very religious. They want to impose religious rule on us all. It's a very scary thought. The only hope, you know, George Orwell said, if there's any, within his novel, his character said, if there's any hope, it's with the proletariat. I think that's what it said. I think he was referring to just very poor, like the very poor who are not constantly being monitored by the party in 1984. I mean, today I would, in this timeline, in this reality, in our context, I would say if there's any hope, it's with the center. It's with the people who reject the woke and they reject populist Trumpism. And up until the other day, I thought maybe Bill Maher was one of those people, but hearing him say everything we do as humans is, you know, is just a problem. Like everything we do is hurting nature, hurting the earth. So I think Bill Maher should read him some Alex Epstein. And luckily, the younger generation of centrists, people like Lex Fridman and I don't know, you know, the intellectual dark web, a lot of these people, they've read Epstein's books, they've spoken to him, they've been on panels with him. And of course, Epstein brings with him a big influence of Ayn Rand. And so I'm happy to say that based on what I see, the sort of the centrist, sort of the people who they resist the wokeness and they resist the populism, they're a lot more familiar with this view that says, you know, don't jump on board with environmentalism so quickly, or remember that as human beings, we are not supposed to just let nature be pristine. We are supposed to basically command nature by obeying it. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, at 7 p.m. UK time, if you missed it, is the Fountainhead Book Club for members only. So become a member now. All right. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow for the Daily Objective. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and do something to nature to make your life better. And when you do it, think about me. And goodbye.